In the course of your career, you were a deputy sheriff, and then you were a US Peace Corps in Ukraine for a while, and now you're a professor at Northumbria University, specialising in green criminology. How did you come to be so interested in crime and justice?
I think that just stems from a value system of being interested in what's right, reducing harm, keeping people from suffering. And I worked as a police officer for nearly 5 years, and it can be a rewarding career, but it's also very frustrating because you feel, I anyway was into it because I wanted to help people, but you don't really get to help people as much as you want to. I think the most kind of common call I would go to is domestic violence calls, and oftentimes, typically the woman, the victim, they don't want to leave the relationship, and so you struggle with, you think you see how you can help them, but they don't want to be helped in that way.
Was your volunteer work as a Peace Corps different from that? Because I know you were designing programs to prevent sex trafficking. Yeah. So did you feel like you were helping more in that case?
I think it was a little bit better, but there still was the expectation that, so we're Americans, and I was in Ukraine for my Peace Corps experience, and what they expected from us was to help them find money. That was a bit frustrating, that you are helping people, but your involvement in that help is really limited to kind of office sort of work of writing programs and helping them design programs.
You worked, when the work that you did in Ukraine, you were designing programs to prevent sex trafficking. Now you're much more concerned in terms of your research with animal abuse and animal rights issues. What do you consider to be sort of the great moral failing of modern human society?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're certainly terrible to each other, aren't we, human to human, but I do think that the biggest, our biggest moral failing, the biggest crime that we are committing is how we have destroyed the planet. And that's probably most evident within pollution, which is causing climate change. Single-use plastics and driving your car and these sorts of things that we just do in the moment for convenience, that we perfectly well know now that we shouldn't be doing these things, and that they're having long-term consequences that aren't just killing us, but they're killing the planet and other species as well. So I do think that is really the core of what we're doing wrong.
Moving on a little bit from sort of the planet to endangered species, I know you're quite passionate about protecting them. Do we have a duty to protect other species from just disappearing?
I think absolutely we owe a duty to other species, other creatures, partly because a mass majority of their extinctions is our fault, that it is human consumption that's driving so much of this extinction to happen. And I think that why that is our responsibility, and you're talking about human self-interest, that the recognition we are a tiny part of a much larger ecosystem, and this planet isn't all for us, isn't all about us, and as thinking, technological, capable beings, we should be protecting things because we can, rather than causing these sorts of extinctions.
Has did you personally come to be so passionate about environmental issues?
I grew up in Oregon on the west coast of the US, which has a reputation for being very progressive in terms of the environment. So I think my interest in the environment stems from having grown up in a place where that's very common. I can, very early childhood memories, I must have been 4 and my sister was 6 or 7, and she was in the school play because she was already in school, and she was Recycle Girl, and they were already talking that time about, saving the planet, and here's what we need to do. And so I think I've had that message very, very young throughout my life. And then it is about exposure. I live in a gorgeous part of the world where you look out the house I grew up in, where my parents still live, and you look out on snow-capped mountains all year round. I have a very big love of nature from having spent so much time in it. And I think that's just because I've liked it, I've just spent more and more time in it. So I think it just has snowballed a bit, so yeah, now I've dedicated my career to that because it is very, very meaningful to me.